Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Mulligan and Mr. Briggs, for your testimony. Before we move to questions, the committee has received several letters of support for Mr. Briggs and Dr. Mulligan's nominations, and I ask for unanimous consent to enter into the record letters of support for Mr. Briggs, letters of support from the National Restaurant Association, Independent Community Bankers of America, National Small Business Association, National Association of Government Guaranteed Lenders, International Franchise Association, Texas Association of Business, Independent Bankers Association of Texas, Texas Venture Alliance, Economic and Community Development Institute, the Association of Women's Business Centers, Visiting Angels, Small Business Multi-Cloud Coalition, and U.S. Black Chambers. For Dr. Mulligan, letters from the National Small Business Association, Small Business and Entrepreneurship Council, International Franchise Association, a joint letter from Tom Sullivan, SBA's Chief Counsel for Advocacy from 2002 to 2008, and Winslow Sargent, SBA's Chief Counsel for Advocacy from 2010 to 2015, and a letter from Daryl DePriest, SBA's Chief Counsel for Advocacy from 2015 to 2017. Without objection, so ordered. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. So we'll start with you, Mr. Briggs. During your service in the previous Trump administration, you had direct insight into the COVID EIDL and PPP. As you know, both programs have suffered from a lack of transparency and experienced over $200 billion in fraud. These same problems plague many of SBA's loan programs, as I highlighted during last month's hearing on the 7A loan program. If confirmed, do you commit to providing the committee with comprehensive and current information on how SBA's loan programs are performing?
Chair Ernst, thank you for that question. I'm tremendously proud of my service, particularly with the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL program. I believe they did an incredible job of helping to preserve American small business jobs at the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. However, as you have noted, there is way too much fraud in these programs, or was too much fraud. And part of that, particularly with PPP, some of that was statutory mandated guardrails that had to be let down by law. But when I was acting associate administrator, we implemented upfront checks that reduced a lot of that fraud. Since that time, I understand that there have been more upfront checks and identity verification procedures introduced. However, should I be confirmed, I will continue to focus on cracking down on fraud in the current programs and have a zero-tolerance approach to fraud going forward.
Very good. I appreciate that, because I am worried that the 7A loan program could require an appropriation if those defaults are too high without enough fee revenue to offset the losses that we have experienced. Will you commit to reviewing the loan portfolios and make necessary policy changes to avoid taxpayers footing the bill wherever that may lead, including tightening up eligibility?
Thank you, Chair Ernst. Yes, the 7A program right now is cash flow for the negative. For the first time in 12 years, I was noted in the hearing 3 weeks ago. It is a serious problem, and one that ultimately ends up hurting access to credit for all small businesses. I will work with Administrator Loeffler, the Associate Administrator of Capital Access, and all of the relevant SBA staff to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put that program back to its historical position of being having a neutral subsidy, where the taxpayers aren't taxed to run the program.
Very good. No, thank you. And what, in your experience, were the pitfalls of SBA's COVID programs?
Chair Ernst, I've spent the last 4 years thinking about lessons learned from that experience. It was an unprecedented time, as every member of this committee knows, and as Ranking Member Markey did know, we did come together to work on this at a perilous time in our nation's history. I would say the first thing is not to shut down the entire economy, and then hope that something like SBA can solve the problem. I think that if that situation would ever happen again, hopefully we do have more forethought. I also think that something, again, like upfront identity checks and verification, and also to being much more clear about eligibility guidelines going forward, are all things we really need to do in both our capital access and disaster loan programs.
Right, very good. I appreciate that. And we'll go to Dr. Mulligan next. And as I've noted, Dr. Mulligan, under the prior administration, small businesses across the country were burdened with a $1.8 trillion regulatory onslaught and over 350 million hours of paperwork. While the Regulatory Flexibility Act requires agencies to consider how their regulations impact small businesses and look to evaluate less burdensome alternatives, agencies have not followed the law. So I did reintroduce the Prove It Act to require that agencies evaluate the true cost of regulations and to empower advocacy's role to make an agency prove the regulation is necessary and mitigates against cost and compliance burdens for small businesses. Do you support increasing transparency and accuracy in the cost-benefit analysis aspect of SBA's rulemaking process?
Absolutely.
Easy. Do you agree agencies have failed to properly consider the indirect costs of their regulations?
Almost all of them that I've looked at have been pretty weak on considering those costs.
Okay. If confirmed as the Chief Counsel for Advocacy, will you commit to properly evaluating agency rulemaking for both its direct and indirect impact on small businesses?
I commit to do that.
Thank you. And are you supportive of the Prove It Act?
Yes, I support the Prove It Act.
And right on time. My time has expired. Ranking Member Markey.